we recording? My name is Joan Riley, and I'm Senior Director with the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. And it's my pleasure to introduce our Philadelphia project. Our assignment was, I remember the evening well on the phone with Mike and Paul. If you said, Joan, if you have $3.5 billion, $3.5 billion, imagine what you could do in Philadelphia and the region to purchase non-performing real estate assets, create parks and trails, and in Philadelphia, unlike Atlanta, we are not park poor, though we have a number of issues related to equity and access to our growing green infrastructure, support job creation, and stimulate investments in a host of other ways. If you had $3.5 billion to do all that, what would you do? So in Philadelphia, like many of the cities, we're having our own share of issues with this crisis. And in Philadelphia, we say we never want to waste a good crisis, right? So we want to turn it into opportunity. Another thing we say in Philadelphia is that we don't travel alone. So our very first step was to create a very robust public-private partnership. The core group of applicants is the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, which is kind of convening and bringing people together. And last night, I think you met Maitri and Todd. I think we've introduced ourselves so many times, maybe you can just raise your hands, Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. And then we got the head of Planning and Commerce Department on board, and we have a representative from the Planning Commission. We have the Department of Parks and Recreation on board in Philadelphia, and the Office of Housing and Community Development. In addition, we contacted our good friends at Penn Praxis and the University of Pennsylvania, Michael and Harris, who are here with us. And then we have more recently expanded that circle, and we now have some representatives from the development community. And we were able to get Dennis here from Keating to come with us today. And a host of the circles become much bigger. And after today, I think we have ideas about how much broader we still need to make that. So what we'd like to do now is have Harris give you a sense of the vision, the shared picture we have for our project, and then turn it over to Todd to talk to you about our approach and our progress to date. And again, our gratitude to all the people who have funded this project and made it possible for us all to be here. We're already learning so much from each other.
Thank you, Joan. Can everyone hear me okay? Hold on that for a second. I'm going to give you a very quick rundown of a history of Philadelphia. It's really, I think, in some ways instructive that Philadelphia comes after Atlanta, because in many ways, I think you are dealing with issues that we've been grappling with for 60 years. So I'm going to give you sort of almost a back to the future, perhaps, presentation, not necessarily where you're going to be in 60 years, but a look at a city that was very much on the ascendancy for 250 years, that was at the forefront of city planning, technology, industrialization, park design, and we hit the skids in 1960 when all of a sudden we were at 2 million, deindustrialization, depopulation, and deindustrialization hit, the 3 Ds. And today we are, instead of at 2.5 million, which we were anticipated to be in 1960 when we were building our infrastructure and creating the city under the legendary planning director of Ed Bacon, we are now holding steady at 1.5 million. So it's a cautionary tale in many ways. It's hopefully an instructive one, but we're grappling with very different issues. We do not have a robust commercial real estate market that has failed. We had the remnants of a very robust industrial development landscape. Philadelphia was the workshop of the world. I don't know if anyone has heard that term, but between the centennial and the end of World War II, 1876 and the end of World War II, we were making ships, hats, felt, candy, locomotives, you name it. It was made in Philadelphia. And for the most part, it was made along the Delaware River. We have oil refineries. If you come into Philadelphia, you fly over them, you come across the Platte Bridge, past Sunoco's largest refinery right there in the city limits on the Schuylkill. So it's a very different landscape, culturally, socially, economically, and so on. So it's really, as I said, a story now of a hollowed out industrial core, and how do we take the remnants of that industrial past, merge them with our strengths, which are currently in the eds and meds, the education and the medical sectors, and position Philadelphia as a city of choice in the 21st century where a knowledge-based economy can work anywhere. So what are our assets? What do we build on? And we've been grappling with this for a while in the city, trying to figure out how we take the blighted industrial as well as residential past. There's a program over the past 10 years, Neighborhood Transformation Initiative, which was started under former Mayor Street, which took, basically the premise was to assemble blighted properties in neighborhoods and assemble them in a way that private development sector could come in and redevelop those neighborhoods. It hasn't really worked at the moment, and the Redevelopment Authority, which is our state agency which has condemnation powers and is able to put together land assembly deals for housing development, is currently trying to kind of keep that system working. But the larger issue that we've been grappling with is really, what's the future of our waterfronts? If our wealth was built on our waterways and our initial park systems were created to protect the water supply, by 1812, Philadelphia had the first municipal water supply system in the country. The Philadelphia Water Works were known around the world and supplied fresh water to the city. We created a park system to protect those waterways. The question is now, what's the future of the river in Philadelphia as we deal with deindustrialization, ecological imperatives to manage stormwater, meet federal guidelines for our combined sewer and stormwater outfall, and a host of other climate change and other issues. That's where we see this project potentially helping us as we begin to manage the future of our riverfront. So this is a picture of the Delaware River. It's a site called, currently, it's the old Cramp shipyard. It was making ships for World War II up until the 1940s. A power station that now is running at only 20% of its capacity. Again, the amount of electrification and the intensity of an infrastructure that was built for a city of 2.5 million is really, in some cases, just operating at a fraction of its capacity. Go ahead. This is, if you go back, we are, if you know the city, the Ben Franklin Bridge is just to the south of this picture. Penn Treaty Park, the site just up above. Yeah, this is contiguous with the Port Richmond rail yards or the Reading yards, exactly, which represents 250 acres of contiguous industrial land, some of the largest kind of potentially single properties that could be used for this kind of acquisition and park reclamation space, if in fact parks are the right things for us to do. I think that's one of the things that we as a team are grappling with. If you were to inject $3.5 billion into Philadelphia, this is a big hypothetical, does it become like, dropping the bottles of water in a park at Haiti? I'm sure everyone's seen that, those images of just a land grab for that kind of money. What's the right way to really turn kind of Philadelphia around economically? The school system that's in shatters, a middle class that is predominantly leaving the city, infrastructure that's challenged, and yet some significant assets. So, putting Philadelphia in its regional context, Philadelphia is both a county and a city. 1854, we consolidated and became the 134 square miles that we are, which is the center of an 8-county region, or 9-county region, that the Metropolitan Planning Organization, DVRPC, has control over the transportation funding for. This is one of their long-term plans for an open space and conservation network. DVRPC is a largely impotent organization, unlike perhaps ARC here. It's very good at data gathering and putting out plans and putting out policy, but as a governing agency, it's pretty much divides up the spoils, and there's no long-term or strategic alliances in terms of a holistic vision. But we use this because it does show the potential for kind of Philadelphia within a network of green spaces. Philadelphia park system as it exists today, 9,200 acres, the Fairmount Park system. The central feature is a 4,000-acre contiguous park system, literally from City Hall at the epicenter along the Ben Franklin Parkway, out past the east and west parks, where West Park is where the 1876 Centennial was, the site of the Philadelphia Water Works, and then up to Northwestern Avenue in the Wissahickon. But you can see the Pennypack Park from 1950s put in under Ed Bacon's reign in terms of the establishment of the Northeast. The FDR Park, a legacy of the sesquicentennial in 1925, but many parts of the city underserved by parklands, and in particular, as the next slide will show, the industrial past. The nearly 8,000 acres, which Todd will get into in his presentation, that we think could be, under a program perhaps such as this, essentially filling in the gaps and extending what was a visionary, in many ways, I think Philadelphia led the pack in terms of protecting the water supply, buying up the old estates and industry along the Schuylkill to keep a fresh water system. The question is now, what's the future of these lands? How do they play into creating this city of choice with an eds and meds base, lifting up a city which has 20% poverty, or 25% poverty, 20% college education attainment, significant challenges in our workforce, and yet significant assets in terms of built environment, infrastructure, subway system, rail, compact urban form, walkable neighborhoods. All of the kind of urbanism that I know Atlanta and others are trying to incorporate in their cities, we have, but we're dealing with a different type of issue in terms of the disinvestment of the industrial past. So with that, a unintentionally foggy picture of the riverfront, I will give it over to Todd to tell the Philadelphia story.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm going to move quick to just hit the high notes, and if there are any questions or anything, just interrupt me or let me know, and we can get into more detail. We've sort of taken on 3 tasks as part of our project approach, working towards our report and how we're going to roll this out, which has been greatly expanded, I think, by today. So it's very appreciated, everything we've been hearing. And I think we changed some of this, actually, but we'll go through what we have, and we'd love your feedback and insight. So one of the first things we did, like Harris mentioned, is we looked at all the different types of land use along the riverfronts. We've done some very cursory mapping to determine the acreage they represent, and then we've synchronized that with some of the CoStar information that we've gotten from Georgia Tech to determine very approximate acquisition costs, the total market, if you will, the whole pie. This is for the Schuylkill River, the north part of which, as Harris said, is mostly already parkland, but the southern part of which has a lot of underutilized land. Whether or not it's underutilized like Atlanta's, Redfield's, kind of a different picture, but this is one of the geographic areas that we've talked about with our in our project group. The other is the Delaware River, the full stretch of which is this different mosaic pattern without the kind of green infrastructure that the northern part of the Schuylkill has. So if you put that all together, determining the acquisition costs and the total land, it's about 7,600 acres is the whole pie of acquisition prospects that we see, which just summing the acquisition costs that we've been giving without getting into the differences amongst the different types of land would be a total land buy in the $4.8 billion vicinity. So we took that and just divided by the total number of acres that is to get a complete cost per acre, kind of a median across all the land use types, limiting ourselves to the $2.1 billion, which is 60% of the money that we were conceptually given. So we would be able to purchase with our $2.1 billion about 3,300 acres, which is about 40% of the total land along the riverfronts. So amongst the things that we're talking about in addition to costs, and this is why today was so insightful, because we started to see how Atlanta's matrix is coming out. These are just some of the considerations that we know need to be part of that equation. Equitable access to parks, suitability for long-term parks, and kind of the way that ARC has this modeling program, the type of disposition, so I won't go through the whole list. I'm sure most cities will end up with a similar list because these are the stakeholders, the considerations, et cetera. The other thing the second task we've been doing is we've been creating an inventory of open space park projects, green space projects that we know of that are poised or pending or somehow in the pipeline. So not to look at the table really, but just to show you it's ongoing, and it's going to keep ongoing, but it's a GIS, and we have projects, we have locations, we have extents, we know the size, we're looking at the adjacent development prospects so we can understand what sort of catalytic benefit there would be from investing in a certain park project with regard to the development prospects around it. And then we're also collecting information about the acreage, the budgets in terms of just sort of what we've been asked to do, differentiating design, construction, and acquisition costs. So if you sum that list today, what we have is a project inventory that holds about 400 to 500 acres of potential projects, about $40.5 million worth of acquisition costs, which we think is very low because that project inventory is going to keep growing, $29 million in estimated design costs, and $190 million worth of construction costs. And these are going to be inputs for some economic benefit modeling that we're going to do later, which is one of the reasons that we wanted to do the project inventory. This is an example of one of the projects. It's called the Kinwood Trail. It's actually a regional project that connects an adjacent suburb called Lower Merion, which is relatively affluent, to a commercial shopping district in a town called Manayunk, right along the Schuylkill River, and it goes across this gorgeous viaduct, which is underutilized, and SEPTA has donated the right-of-way. So for this project to work, it's a kind of a compilation of this is the bridge. It would move over here to the town of Manayunk, and then there's a series of acquisitions that are needed to complete this kind of green belt, $105,000 worth of design work, $3 million worth of construction work, and then a timeline for when this could all be poised. So this would be a, quote, near shovel-ready project. And then the adjacent development, which is a 5-acre site that was industrial, is slated for around 600 condo units. That's very unlikely to move forward now, but that's in a preliminary conditional use hearing. So we're kind of looking at this as an example of the sort of project that's coming out of our project inventory that would be part of the considerations. Just some renderings of what this new green space would look like. So the other thing that we wanted to spend time on today is the third task we're undertaking, and we're hiring some help with this too. This is another one of the projects in our inventory. It's called the North Delaware Greenway Trail. So this starts actually north of the Conrail or the Port Richmond yards that were the subject of that photo, the fuzzy photo. And this greenway runs along the Delaware River, and there was a number of residential and other types of development planned, the majority of which has not moved forward. But the development was being planned in a way that benefited from and was coordinated with the greenway. One of the whole points of our project was, one of the things that we submitted our application for was to see this greenway, the full greenway along all the rivers, get built. And so this was an example. Many of those links are not moving forward because of the economy. So they hired a firm called eConsult that we hope to work with that looked at the investments, both the public and the assumed private investments, and then did some creative math about the outputs in terms of the economic development, jobs, et cetera. So I just wanted to quickly go through this. It's a lot of information, but just kind of hit the high points. And so you know, we want to talk about impact really earnestly. We want to get expert opinions about it. And this is the sort of analysis that we hope to do kind of at a citywide scale for some of our projects. So they envisioned a big disparity in the ways that the greenway could work, from a public cost of $10 million, which is kind of the low budget version, to a cost of almost $200 million for a real broadening of the trail and lots of acquisition, pocket parks, things like that, higher design. And then they assumed these residential developments coming in, which would have contributed in the low scenario, $828 million, in the high scenario, an additional investment of $1.5 billion. So what this firm forecasts then is the combination public and private investment of $838 or $1.7 billion would have resulted in $1.3 billion to $2.2 billion in total output. That's like the cumulative everything, taxes, earnings, and all. The subsets that we think are really important are $219 million to $320 million in earnings, which is here and here, and 5,800 to 8,500 jobs. There'd also be very relevant to Redfields to Greenfields, residential property value increase due to the new open space that was being planned of 28 million to 348 million, again, dependent on the extent of the greenway that was built. So that would be an annual return for the government's money of 17 to 28%. And then they computed this interesting thing, also with information from TPL and others, the annual recreation benefits. So this is what you avoid spending to go to the gym, and the other metrics of sort of personal benefit from having recreational amenities of 54,000 to almost 2 million. And that's based on assumed visitation, which is obviously a foggy estimate. And then they also did a little bit of creative math to estimate that there could be a TIF for $40 to $70 million at the onset of this project based on this analysis. So we wanted to share this to show you where we're headed to try to do some of that work for our project here. Even under the tight time constraints, we think we can create some of this for some of the assumptions that we're working with. There's also actually four municipal efforts that are important to synchronize for our team, and I think today that became even more clear. There's an industrial land study that's going to be due in May 2010, which is supposed to right-size the city's opinion about how much land should be held for industrial that is not currently in use, which is a long, ongoing discussion that's very relevant for our riverfronts. There's a zoning code rewrite, which is going to be done in 2010, after which remapping will start, but that obviously has a lot of implications for the future use of parcels that are temporary or interim open space rather than permanent. And one of the ways we're thinking about it is that we'll have parcel scenarios where a certain percentage will be permanent open space year 1, year 2, and the remainder of it will be interim open space for year 3, year 4, year 5. Maybe year 6, some construction starts that makes it more amenable to a future land use. And then year 10, we see a light manufacturing facility built there conceptually. We do some modeling about the benefit of that. So the zoning code obviously has a lot to say about that, as well as a comprehensive plan, which is going to be done in 2011 with kind of district level planning rolling out over the subsequent 4 years. So amongst the other things that are ongoing questions, specifically, a lot of which happened today, I think, we're also thinking about these, and we're going to work with this firm that we hope to hire to do some of the creative economic benefit stuff. The questions that we are still wrestling with are the future of industry in Philadelphia, the equitable distribution of parks issue, environmental contamination and how it flows through the title, and the fact that you can remediate a piece of land for a certain land use which might not be appropriate or approved in a regulatory environment for another land use, and we're not going to be determining all that right now. So that's a big consideration for Philadelphia's riverfronts. The governance entity with the acquisition, operations, and maintenance thing with a city that wants to currently shed land that it owns, and job creation is very important, obviously, so we have an eye to that. This is a picture from Bartram's Garden, which is open space on Philadelphia's Schuylkill River, just to sort of end our presentation on a high note. This is what the first botanical garden in the United States was, and it's part of the park system today. Any questions, thoughts, ideas?
It was a turbo tour.
Well, why is the price per acre on this old industrial property so high? I mean, that's what I was surprised at. It seems to me like you're not getting the right broker to handle your purchases.
It's been land banked, a lot of it in advance of casinos, which the state has implemented over 4 years ago. The state imposed gaming in Pennsylvania, and the sites that have been selected, 2 of them are on the Delaware Riverfront. There was a significant amount of land acquisition and land banking over the past 20 years as this has been anticipated.
And the casinos going there.
One is and one is questionable, but it's mandated by law that we have 2 of them. There's a whole.
So what are the people doing with the land?
Well, now there's some of the.
It's like that.
Properties are being. There's ancillary uses, whether it's hotels or other entertainment uses, but nothing's happening right now.
Yeah, just surprised. I would think you could negotiate those prices.
Yeah.
Actually, we all think that too.
Okay, good.
And there was a sort of blip in the market 2 years ago, as everybody was anticipating these casinos. There was a lot of residential development just south of this picture. A ton of it was on the books. It's all kind of like right now.
Right.
I think the important thing for us to know, the way we differentiate is where if land is built on a growth model, we're built on a no growth. And in fact, we're built on a decline model, although we've managed to stabilize, which gives us a much different approach, I think, to this project than what we've seen from the land.
There's also an ongoing debate about how much industrial land needs to be held for future industrial use. There's no clear consensus.
Now, one thing that we made sure of Atlanta is that you incorporate the entire metropolitan area. Are you guys thinking about going out because they have those malls out there at Valley Forge that look like about half of them could be torn down.
Right. The mayor's office has convened this new regional forum that's looking at energy sharing and buying energy as a region and other things. And so we're hopeful that that's one of the vehicles for that, in addition to the obvious open space links discussion. So we're mindful of that. We have to do more. I think we should include it. We're time sensitive.
Some of those retail areas that probably are past their prime. So
Philadelphia is we have something called home rule, and each one of these is in a township. Each one has extraordinarily different zoning laws, and everything about it becomes so completely different that the things that we extrapolate.
At contiguous tracts of land along the riverfront, but I see the point that you're making, and we can absolutely put it into the scope of work to consider.
Thank you so much.